More than 3 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits the last week of March. That's more than quadruple the previous record in the history of the country. Yet in a matter of months, jobless figures like that, 3 million, could look small by comparison. Goldman Sachs estimates that later this year, America's unemployment rate could hit 15%. That would be the highest figure since the 1930s. That's almost 25 million people out of work. And Goldman's estimate is not even the highest one. Economists at the St. Louis branch of the Federal Reserve Bank are projecting an unemployment peak as high as 32%. That's 47 million people out of work. In case you're wondering, that is worse than the worst year of the Great Depression. Much worse, actually. At some point, coronavirus will be gone, but unfortunately, we could live with the crushing unemployment numbers for far longer. And that's a disaster for people, for individuals, for families. But it's also a threat to the stability of our country. Nothing makes a nation more volatile than huge numbers of people who don't have jobs. That's always true. So we need to do whatever we can to prevent that from happening. But here's the amazing thing. The federal government is doing its best tonight to make it much worse. Here's how. Today, April 1st, the Department of Homeland Security released 20,000 new H-2B visas for seasonal guest workers to come into America and take jobs in industries like landscaping, food processing, and resorts. Another 15,000 visas will become available next month in May. Now, these are bonus visas, by the way. By law, the United States only has to offer 66,000 H-2B visas a year. But Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf has used his discretionary powers to add 35,000 extra visas. So that's a total of 100,000 workers coming to this country to take jobs during the single biggest unemployment crisis in a century. It's demented. And yet it gets worse than that. Yesterday, DHS notified 85,000 new winners of the H-1B visa lottery. Today, those winners can begin filling out their full visa applications for jobs that will begin in October. That's just when unemployment could be at its peak and coronavirus could be making a comeback as the weather cools. Those are the forecasts. H-1B visas are supposed to allow companies to hire foreigners with extraordinary skills that simply don't exist in the American workforce. It's a fraud, of course, a well-documented fraud. In practice, the visas are used to import tens of thousands of tech workers from India so Silicon Valley can profit from a cheaper workforce. Nothing against the workers, but they're taking jobs that would go to Americans. The big winners in this scheme are companies like Apple, Google, and IBM, which take in hundreds of H-1B workers every year. At many companies, including AT&T, as we chronicled recently on this show, American workers are ordered to train their foreign replacements and then fired once they're no longer useful. This has been going on for a long time. It's always been disgusting. But now, it's a threat to our country, and that's not an overstatement. In a year where tens of millions of Americans could be looking for work, our government is importing more than 150,000 workers from abroad. And that's without counting thousands of H-2A agricultural workers who will be coming as well. The president needs to stop this from happening, and he can. If President Obama was able to ignore existing immigration law and create DACA, and he did, then certainly the current president has the power to cut legal immigration in order to protect the nation. And in fact, American law gives him explicitly this right. Here it is. This is from Section 1182F of Title 8 in the U.S. Code. Quote, whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may make a proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem appropriate, end quote. It's very clear. And the Supreme Court just affirmed this law 2 years ago in the case of the president's travel ban. So it's real. Now, that ban, you'll remember, was levied to protect Americans from terrorism. But now we're facing an immeasurably greater crisis than terrorism. We're facing a global calamity that could wreck our economy, fracture our society, because that's always a byproduct of it, erode our rights, shatter our institutions, transform this country into a poor country, a has-been ex-superpower beholden to China. That could happen. Preventing that from happening is the most important test this president or any president in our lifetime will face. The time to placate corporate interests looking for low wages at all costs has passed. We need to stop this.